So now it's time to start a discussion about arrays. But first, let's create a new project. I'm gonna call it arrays. For the language, select Kotlin. For the build system, IntelliJ. Make sure to have the JDK selected and check this little box, add sample code to have the main function auto-generated for us. And click on create. Alright, now let's delete the code inside the curly braces of the main function. Let's hide the project pane and let's start our discussion about arrays. And so far in our videos, we've only looked at how we can store only one single value in a variable. And that is very useful, but what if you have a large amount of values that you want to store in our variables? Let's say that you want to store 30 or 40 different values in our variable of a certain type. Of course that you can declare a variable for each of one of those values and then assign it to the variables. But what happens if you have 1000 or 20,000 values? In that case, it will not be practically possible to write each one of those variables and then assign a value to it. And Kotlin help us here because it provides us arrays. And an array allows us to store more than one single element in a variable name. So it allows us to store more elements in one single variable name. Now, to declare an array, we type val. Here we type names. Next, we need to provide a type, and the type is going to be an array. And IntelliJ has given us some suggestions there, so press enter to fill in that for you. And now we put angle brackets, and inside the angle brackets we're going to put what kind of data this array is going to store. So it's going to store string or text or sequence of characters. Then you put equals, and here we don't type a literal value. Here we type a function call, and here we type array of. And now we put our elements inside the parentheses of the function call separated by comma. So I'm gonna put three names here. So I'm gonna put John, Steven, and Megan. Now let's see what we have here. So first we have the val keyword. Next we have a name for our variable, and the name is names. Then we have the type, and the type is an array, which means that we can store multiple values in our variable. And next we have angle brackets and string, and this means that this array is gonna store text or sequence of characters. It's gonna store only strings. And then we put equals, we have the function called array of, and then we put our elements of type string, which is those names, separated by comma. But because Kotlin has type inference, here we can delete the type, and the type is going to be inferred in the same way it was inferred previously when you just declare a simple variable. So now the type is still inferred as an array of strings. And now it's a good moment to introduce type hints, but we need to activate the type hints from settings. And to do that, you can go to file and click on settings, or you can press the shortcut that we have here for our particular system, and for Windows is Ctrl Alt S. So I'm gonna press Ctrl Alt S, and here we go to, if you have something like this, you go to editor, click on this greater arrow in front of editor, and then you go down here where it says inline hints. Click on this greater arrow in front of inline hints, and from those options select Kotlin, and here you go to types and select local variable types. Then click apply and OK. Now what we have here on the right of our variable name is a hint. So it's not real text. This is just there to remind us what kind of type this variable has, and in our case is an array of string. And my suggestion for you is to keep those hints activated, because in this way you'll always see what type a variable is without explicitly declaring the type. So this is not this is just there to help us, to remind us what kind of type a variable is. Now let's say that I want to output a certain element in the array in the console. To do that, we cannot just type here println and pass names, because we need to be more specific than that. We cannot pass the array here. and to get a specific element in the array, you need to know that the elements in the array are stored at indexes, and the index of an array always starts at 0. So the first element is stored at the index 0. And to get the first element, we type here square brackets and we put 0. And that, if you press Shift Control P on it, it's a string, because that is gonna return us the first value in the array, which is John. So if you run this code, we get John. But let's put some text here to make it more clear that this is the first element. So let's type first element. Now let's choose the $sign, because this now is a placeholder, and let's put the curly braces around our element and the quotation mark here. Now if you run this code, you get first element John. Let's put here some. So we get the first element John, because John is stored at the index 0. And in the same way, John is stored at the index 0, Steven is stored at the index 1, and Megan is stored at the index 2. So our index starts at 0. The index of an array always starts at 0. And you can replace a specific element in the array also using the index operator. So you can type here names, again square brackets 0 equals. So now I'm gonna assign a new value to our element stored at index 0, which is now I'm gonna put here the value Alex. So now if you run this code, now we get first element Alex, because John, which is at index 0, was replaced with the value Alex. So now we have Alex, Steven, and Megan. But what you can't do is you cannot get an element at an index that doesn't exist. So we cannot get here, let's say, an element at the index 4, because if you run this, look what happens. We get an error which says array index out of bounds exception, index 4 out of bounds for length 3. That is because the index 4 doesn't exist, and here we try to access that value, and that value and that index doesn't exist. And this is called the runtime error, because this error is called only while our app is still running. So you don't have here an error like we have for here you don't have a compile error which you saw in our previous videos. That is because the size of an array is not known until at compile time. Also, it's very important to know here that the size of an array is fixed. So this will always have the size 3, and the only way to add new elements to it is to put the elements directly here. But there is not another way to, let's say that I can put another element in the array down here. We can only replace elements. And then in the next videos, you're gonna see that there are other arrays which are more flexible in the sense that they can grow and shrink. We can add or remove elements from those arrays. But for now, we're gonna look just at this array. So let's change this back to 0 to don't have that error. And to avoid this kind of errors, you can check to see what is the size of the array. In other words, to see what is the number of elements stored in array using the size variable. So let's do that. So I'm gonna add the println statement below for our first one. So I'm gonna type here println. And here I'm gonna put the text, the size of the array is. And here I'm gonna put the $sign, curly braces. Now I'm gonna use our names array. And here we're gonna put dot size. And this is gonna give us the size of the array, or it's gonna give us in other words, the number of elements which are stored in this particular array. So if you run this code, you're gonna see first output, the first element is Alex, and then you're gonna see the size of the array is 3. So we get first element Alex, and the size of the array is 3. And this is very important to note, that the size of the array is always 1 times greater than the last index in the array. So we have an array which starts as index 0 and ends at index 2, which has a size of 3. So it's very important to remember this to avoid crashes in your programming. And of course that you can put other data types in our array. So I can declare another array here, also val, called numbers. And we can use the array of again. And here I can pass some numbers. And now you see the type is an array of int, or an array of integers or whole numbers. And you can also mix types here. So you can put here numbers and strings. So now we have an array, and this, which is between our angle brackets, you don't need to understand this for now, but this allows us to have array of 2 types, respectively of type int and of type string. And you can put also a char here if you want. Let's say A. So we can create an array of any type if you want. So this allows us to mix our types in the array. And because we've looked at loops and how we can use loops, you can use loops to loop to this array. So I can put here, let's say that I want to use the first array, so I can put here for name in names. Now I'm going to refer our array of strings. Then print ln name. So now you see that we have this type hint for our name variable that we have here. Of course this can have whatever name you want. Now if you run this, you're gonna see our 3 names outputted down here in the console. So now we have Alex, Steven and Megan, because now we're using the for loop to loop through our array names. And this is interesting, but what if you want to loop through our array numbers, which is a mixed array? We have numbers and strings and chars. We can refer it here. Let's call it I in and now you see the type that was inferred for the I is this comparable that we have here. So this is gonna loop through our mixed array. So we put here I. Now if you run this, you're gonna see our numbers and then our name 1 and our char outputted down here. So now we get first element Alex, which is our println statement, then the next println statement, the size of the array, then we have our numbers in our numbers array, and then we have our name 1 and then we have our char. So this allows us to loop through our mixed arrays. But what if I want to output only if I want to output in the console only the integers in this mixed array called numbers? To do that, and this is a good way to introduce the is keyword. And with the is keyword, we can check to see if a literal or a variable is of a certain type. So I can put here if I is, let's say, an int, then and only then I'm gonna output its value in the console. Then I'm gonna call our println, and I'm gonna pass our I variable to our println function. Now if you run this, you're gonna see in our loop only the numbers here, only the integers, because this is keyword is checking to see if our I is of type integer, and this is gonna return true or false. In our case, it's going to return true for our for all of our numbers that we have here. So we have 4, 5, 6, 7, and 4 again. And you can check to see if this is a char. And we're gonna see in the console only our single element A outputted down here. So we have A. Or you can check to see if this is a string. This element that we're looping at this particular iteration, let's say. So if you run this, you're gonna see in the console only name1, because only name1 is of type string. So you get name1. So this is very important to know that with the is keyword, you can check to see if a variable or a literal is of a certain type or if it's not, and based on that to execute some code. In our case, you output that value in the console if that condition is true. So this is how you can use the is keyword and the for loop to loop through our array, and the is keyword to check to see if an element in our array is of a certain type or if it's not. And let's change our array numbers to a different name, because numbers is very specific. It implies that we only have numbers in this array, but we have a mixed type, so we have multiple types in our array. We don't have only numbers. And to do that, instead of changing our numbers array in everywhere in our code where you're using this variable, we can right click on it, go to refactor, and click on rename, or you can click Shift F6. Now, if I change the name of our array numbers, it will be changed everywhere where you call this variable. So look, if I delete now the name is also changed in our line of code 9 we're using in the loop. So now if I change this to, let's call it mixed elements, if I press enter, now this will be also changed everywhere where we call our variable, respectively on the line 9 here. So now we have our array numbers changed to mixed elements, which is more descriptive because it implies that we have an array of mixed elements.